Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms. You can find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin. And if you guys haven't seen them just yet, over on YouTube or on Spotify, wherever you listen to the podcast, last couple weeks I've put out my top tier of each position, and I really wanted to give a big shout out to all the guests that I had on to talk over the podcast and each one of the positions. And just, a big shout out to those guys. Really appreciate them coming on, sharing their thoughts. And if you didn't listen to the tight end episode, please make sure you do. One, it's great content. But number two, I did announce on that I will have a recurring guest, basically a co-host for the podcast moving forward. My buddy Dale, real life friend, he did his first ever podcast on the tight end episode. Make sure you follow him over on Twitter. Just let him know what your thoughts are. And he was really nervous, so just give him some reassuring comments. He'd really appreciate it. So thank you guys for tuning in today. With training camp kicking up, I really wanted to get out my 2022 my guys. And the quarterback position specifically is the one we'll start with today. And these are two guys that I think you need to get on the train with ASAP before it just shoots off to the moon, as the kids say nowadays. And these two quarterbacks, I believe that they're going to return very well for fantasy in 2022, and they are going to just vault up the boards in 2023 and beyond in terms of value. So buying in now, and you're going to see a massive return on your investments, in my opinion. So the two guys starting off, number one, it's not even that hot of a take. A lot of people have him up there, but it's going to be Trey Lance with the San Francisco 49ers. And I say it's not a hot take. Everyone is looking forward to Trey Lance ever since he was the number 3 overall pick in last year's draft class. He was a rookie last year. He managed to play in 6 total games, but in 3 of those games, he had 7% of snaps. He basically came in for 3 rush attempts, 1 pass attempt, 4 rush attempts, and that was pretty much it. And then the last game, he had 4%. He came in for 1 pass. So he really didn't do much in 3 of those games. So he only had about 2.5 actual games worth of playtime last year. Now, Trey Lance, coming out of college, only had 17 games played total in college. So he was very, very raw just coming out into the NFL. He's 22 years old right now and is the current Dynasty ADP quarterback number 10. So he's pretty high, but I think that he's going to return on that value and just massively jump up after this season. Now, the reasons why are pretty simple. If you look at the 2.5 games that he did play last year, and when you look at Trey Lance, first thing you have to look at is just the raw physical ability. He's very young, 22 years old, very inexperienced, but the dude has a cannon for an arm. He probably has one of the best arms in the NFL, and he's only 22 years old. It can only get better from here. Now, if you actually followed it last year, that was one of the biggest reasons why Trey Lance didn't play much as a rookie. If you followed the training camp last year, Jimmy Garoppolo won the battle, and part of it is because he was more experienced. He knew the Kyle Shanahan offense, everything like that. But the second part of that was Trey Lance was very inaccurate in training camp last year because he put too much power on basically every single pass. The short stuff, the long stuff, doesn't matter. And the dude does have a cannon, but he needs to learn how to turn it into, maybe just a Desert Eagle from time to time. Just, take a little bit of power off that thing every now and then. But if you look at Trey Lance, I think that the sky is the limit for this guy. And number one reason is it's Kyle Shanahan offense. we all know that Kyle Shanahan is a wizard when it comes to the run game. I think that he's going to scheme up a lot for Trey Lance because Trey Lance is 6'4", 224 pounds. He didn't actually run an official 40, but the anticipated 40 for him was about 4.5, which is just flying for a man that big. And that'll be a hint towards the second quarterback that I'm going to talk about here today. But Trey Lance is just a physical freak. And he is someone that has Lamar Jackson type of rushing in his game. We saw a lot of that with him at North Dakota State. He did a lot of rushing there, and I think that he's going to be able to do a ton of it in Kyle Shanahan's offense. All the beat reporters this year have said that Trey Lance is running all over the field in training camp so far, and I think that's going to continue moving forward. And Kyle Shanahan is going to be able to scheme that up no matter what. Now, when it comes to the passing game, we all know that Trey Lance has a cannon, like I talked about. His deep ball is going to be great. Brandon Ayuk has been connecting with that all over training camp so far, but it's the short stuff that they need to work on a little bit more. Well, the benefit to that is he also has Kyle Shanahan for that, who is able to scheme open passes just on the regular, like it's nothing, right? He is able to get these guys into space that they can just turn these plays into massive yards after contact, which is how Debo and George Kittle just absolutely thrive in this offense. So they're going to be able to scheme open Trey Lance short passes, even if he's not the most accurate. They're going to make it easy on him as much as possible. So he's going to have a lot in the passing game. He's going to have a ton in the rushing game. Now, again, I talked about it. He only played 2.5 games last year. You look at that. He averaged about roughly 31 rushing attempts in those 2.5 games. You average that out over a full season, that's about 211 rushing attempts. That is a ton for a quarterback. First off, that's a lot right there. Second off, you take his average, and I think this is low. They brought him in a lot last year near the goal line, so it kind of alters these numbers a little bit there. But he averaged about 4.4 yards per carry. On 211 pass attempts, that's 934 rushing yards. Now, you add in Debo and George Kittle with those yak monsters that they are. The sky is the limit for Trey Lance. I'm telling you, jump on board while you still have a chance. QB10 is going to be smashed this year. I'm telling you, I love this kid. I think that he has all the potential in the world, and going forward in 2023 and beyond, it's just going to get better. And the benefit of this guy as well, I know he was the number 3 overall draft pick last year, so there's a lot of expectations on Trey Lance, but the San Francisco 49ers gave up 3 first-round picks for this guy at number 3 last year. They have to make him work. If he does not work out, they will probably get fired because, you know, you cannot give up that much for a quarterback and then not have him pan out. So I think that their jobs ride on Trey Lance, and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are going to do everything imaginable to make this kid succeed. And that's why I think that for fantasy, buying in now is not going to be something you regret. Now, again, this is not a bold take. A lot of people are in on Trey Lance. That's why I think this second guy is a little bit more bold than what most people are anticipating, though the ADP is a little bit higher than I anticipated. The second guy is actually Justin Fields with the Chicago Bears. Now, he is 23 years old. Current ADP of quarterback number 13, and that 13 surprised me a little bit for Superflex leagues because Justin Fields, there's not a lot of hype around him because the Chicago Bears are one of the worst rosters in the NFL this year. And when you look at it from top to bottom, this roster is just not looking very good. The defensive side of the ball has been completely gutted. When you look at the wide receivers, there's not a lot of talent there. Darnell Mooney, people are very excited about. Velus Jones was a second-round pick. Byron Pringle, Equanimeous St. Brown. These are the number 2 wide receivers listed for the Bears going into 2022. Not a great situation. Now, you've got David Montgomery and Cole Kmet, which people are very high on for the running back and the tight end position, but the offensive line is also not very good. It's kind of in shambles as well. So why am I high on Justin Fields with all those negatives that I just laid out? Well, the biggest reason is I think for this offense to do anything, it's going to have to run through Justin Fields. Now, you get the negatives out of the way. Last year, he played a lot more games than Trey Lance did. He ended up playing a total of 12 games, but 2 of them were half games, so let's average it out to 11 games total. He had 270 attempts, 160 completions, only 1,800 yards, 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 12 fumbles, 5 of them lost, so he was able to recover 7 of them, but that's not great. I'm not too worried about the fumble issue. A lot of quarterbacks coming out of college have that in year 1. A lot of it has to do with the adjustment from the college football to the Duke, the NFL football, as they call it, and it's a lot bigger than the college ball. So you look at Lamar Jackson, he actually had a lot of fumbles in year 1, his half season that he played as well. So it's just something that a lot of these guys have to get used to. You just have to learn how to grip the ball a little bit better. Not worried about that. Justin Fields is one of the hardest working quarterbacks, I think, as a younger guy in the league currently. So I think that he has that going for him. So I think he's going to be able to wipe those fumbles off the board. And when you look at it, I don't think that Justin Fields is going to be the safest in the passing game, but the defense is terrible and they are going to be behind a lot. They have a very tough schedule this year. A lot of games. I mean, they've got to play the Packers twice, Niners in week 1. You know, they've got a couple easier ones, but they got Minnesota, who I don't think is much of a slouch, New England, Dallas. There's just a ton of tough matchups in there. But I think that they're going to need to pass the ball a lot to stay in this thing. There might be a lot of interceptions this year, but I also think that there's going to be a lot more production as well. Now, the coaching staff, they have a whole new offensive coordinator, came over from Green Bay. He was the quarterback coach for Aaron Rodgers. And before Aaron Rodgers signed his massive extension this offseason, he said that basically he wanted to go wherever this quarterback coach went just because that's how much he liked this guy. And the fact that he went over to coach Justin Fields is saying a lot, I think. So if Aaron Rodgers likes this guy that much, I think that Justin Fields is going to get along with him just fine. And he's the offensive coordinator for the Bears now with a defensive-minded head coach. So they're going to want to try and get him involved. But again, it's just a very low talent situation for the Chicago Bears. Now, from a holistic standpoint, one of the biggest misconceptions that I've heard personally on Justin Fields is the Chicago Bears don't believe he's their guy. That's why they're not investing much in the receiving core, in the offensive line, everything like that. But if you look at it from a just big picture situation, what are the Bears doing? They are trying to rebuild this team from a cultural standpoint. They're shedding guys that don't want to be there. They're shedding high contract guys for low production, essentially, and they are just creating a ton of cap space and getting a ton of draft picks for next year's draft class. It's a good draft class next year, and the Bears are going to have a high draft pick. They need a wide receiver. I would not be shocked if they targeted Jackson Smith and Jigba, Justin Fields' former teammate in Ohio State, who is a very talented guy. A lot of people's number 1, basically, in the draft class in the wide receiver core. They could definitely get him with a high pick next year, kind of like a Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow situation there. Or they could go off after a very high offensive lineman next year. So I think that what they're doing is, by clearing all this cap, getting all these draft picks, they're really basically saying that they're low-key tanking for 2022 because you can't officially do it. Otherwise, you end up like the Miami Dolphins and you'll lose your first-round pick. So they're subtly tanking so that they can get a high draft pick, have a ton of cap space, and just really attack this team next year in free agency and the draft. So I think that Justin Fields is going to be around for a long time. I think that this offense has to run through him. And then again, if you look at it from a physical standpoint, he's 23 years old, 6'3", 228 pounds, basically the same comp as Trey Lance. He ran a 4.4 40, which is faster than what Trey Lance was projected to run with his time there. And he is just a monster physically. He's just a big, imposing dude, and he can do whatever he wants on the field with the ball in his hands. I think that Justin Fields, he ran for 72 attempts last year for 420 yards, 5.8 per carry. I think that number is going to massively come up because if you listen to what happened last year with the Chicago Bears, Matt Nagy built the system around Andy Dalton as the starter and tried to plug Justin Fields into it instead of building a system for Justin Fields and making Andy Dalton adapt, which is what probably the smarter option would have been, so that everything was in place for Justin Fields already. He just catered everything to Andy Dalton, which I think ultimately got him fired, but it is what it is at this point in time. I think that they're going to utilize Justin Fields. Again, I just talked about Trey Lance. He had a 17-game pace of 211 carries. 72 is nothing for a quarterback. I think that Justin Fields is going to be around that 200 mark as well, maybe 800, 900 yards as well, and you could definitely see maybe 8 or 9 touchdowns in that category as well. So I think that the rushing attempts is going to give Justin Fields a very solid floor for this season. And then again, they're going to have to pass the ball. It might not always be pretty, but again, I think that they're going to have to use Justin Fields. They might win a few games that they're not supposed to, and every yard is a point for fantasy football. So, you're getting points regardless. The interceptions, as long as he can control those, it's going to be fine. So Justin Fields, I think for 2022 is going to be sneaky good for the quarterback position, and I think that going forward, they're really going to try and build around him in the future. So I think both of these guys, Justin Fields and Trey Lance, buying into them now while you have the chance is only going to pay off massively for your teams going forward. Please let me know what your guys' thoughts are, but I love these two guys. And when I say this too, just to be clear, I have been getting these guys in every league possible this whole offseason, anywhere I can get these guys, just because I believe in them so much. A lot of people out there, I like this guy, I like this guy. I am someone who wants to live by what they say. I'm going to back up what I say, put my money where my mouth is, essentially. So I'm believing in these guys. I'm investing in them in my leagues. So I'm hoping that you guys will as well. If you're in my leagues with me, don't even try. I'm not selling them to you guys, but that is what it is. So thank you guys for listening. Let me know what your thoughts are over on Twitter, on YouTube, in the comments down below. If you can leave a comment on Spotify or anything like that, it just helps with the algorithms. Leave a 5-star review or subscribe or leave a like on YouTube. Just anything you can to help me out. I would truly appreciate it. Tell the podcast about it to one friend if you can. And anything you guys can do to help just the podcast grow, I would greatly appreciate it. I appreciate you guys, and I'm going to be back next time with the running back position. Thank you guys for listening, and good night.